When you have the descendants of the Confederacy and Operation Paperclip coalesce around a political party, what you get is today's Republican Party. And what we just saw from the young Republicans in the leaked text messages of their group chat is exactly what you would expect from the offspring of those people. We've said for the longest time that the Republican Party is just the formal wing of every white nationalist and white supremacist group in the country. This just gives us proof of who they really are, as if we needed any confirmation. It should come as no surprise when we look through the Politico report that shows that Republicans in a group chat were celebrating all sorts of things that we've always accused them of, but they always denied. Now we see it in black and white. Here's a short example of the things that they said. Everyone who votes no is going to the gas chamber. Also, we are officially under consideration for a Trump endorsement. I'd go to the zoo if I wanted to watch monkey play ball. Are you going to do whatever it takes? I'm ready to watch people burn. That's just a small selection of quotes that were leaked from the group text of the young Republican groups throughout the country. When we think about the Republican Party of today and all the things that they support, this is consistent with the party base. Think about it. The leader of that party, the 80-year-old diaper dementia patient, ran an entire campaign and ran several campaigns with overt and covert callbacks to the failed Austrian painters campaign from World War II era Germany. He had direct and indirect callouts throughout his entire campaign and used the exact language that the dictator from Germany used to attain power. So the idea that we should be surprised that Republicans are saying these sorts of things amongst themselves is silly when you actually zoom out and look at it. The fact of the matter is the Republican Party continues to show who they are. What becomes clear as we get exposed to more and more of these Republican surprises is that the Republican Party is not any different than the party that rose to power in 1930s Germany. We're catching the early stage of where they're going. And if we ever wondered what the people in 1930s Germany were thinking and why they didn't do anything, all we need to do is look at ourselves today and watch how the Republican Party is silent as their leaders do whatever they want to bring forward a Christo-fascist state. Now, digging into the Politico report, what's interesting is how casually the people within these group texts were referencing minorities, Black people, Jewish people, everything and anything that we would expect them to in these chats. William Hendricks, the vice chair of the Kansas Young Republicans, used various versions of the N word as a slur more than a dozen times in the chat. Bobby Walker, who's the vice chair of the New York State Young Republicans, referred to rape as epic. Peter Ginta, who's chair of the New York State Young Republicans, wrote that everyone who votes no is going to get the gas chamber. And Ginta was referring to an upcoming vote on whether he should become chair of the Young Republican National Federation. And this particular organization has 15,000 members within their political organization, and they're all between 18 and 40 years old. Now, we as outside observers see people like Nick Fuentes saying what they say, and we easily allow mainstream Republicans to say, no, his ideology is not ours. What these texts reveal and these chats reveal is that there is no difference between the Republican Party, MAGA Republicans, Groypers, Oath Keepers, Patriot Front, the KKK, and any other white nationalist group. It's all the same. If ever there was a real life version of the Pam Beasley meme, this would be the perfect time for it. And while some people might reference these chats as just jokes or locker room talk, it's clear that this was so casually thrown out that is part of the DNA of the organization. When you have members of this organization openly talking about their admiration of Hitler, when they're openly talking about redesigning showers and converting them into gas chambers, and wanting to watch the execution of their fellow citizens in the same way that 1930s German leaders exterminated their population, you get a clear idea of the wiring that exists within the Republican Party. What makes this interesting is that their leader has often described his political opposition as the enemy from within. When we think about the actual texts that are released, the context that's being discussed, it's clear who the real enemy is. No civilized society should accept this sort of language. There is no free speech argument that should allow this type of conversation to exist. Because the longer it exists, the more it festers. And we're seeing the outcome of that in this current regime. Donald Trump is a product of Nixon era and Reagan era policies put into place that's been accelerated by Bush era Patriot Act and Islamophobia. You can draw a straight line to Trump from Nixon and Reagan and Bush. And the entire ideology is lockstep with what we saw in 1930s Germany and what we saw in the Jim Crow era South and in the Confederacy. There is no difference. Now, if you're sitting there thinking that this is just a small collection of out of context texts, there's 2,900 pages of these chats that Politico exposed. And they were shared among dozens of millennial and Gen Z Republicans between January and August. And what's becoming clear as their stroked out salmon colored septuagenarian walking colostomy bag of a leader has taken office, it's given these people the courage to say this stuff out loud. And when you think about what the end goal is, when by saying this stuff out loud, what you notice is that there is no difference between Trumpism and Republicanism. All of these people are working to take broader control of the Republican Party and drive it even further right as a way to serve the wishes of their dear leader. And what this exposes about Republicans across the country is that embedded within the Republican Party, the roots and foundations of this party is a racist, anti-Semitic, violent, and misogynistic culture. And that flows directly from the leader. There's a saying that attitude reflects leadership, and there is no better reflection of the attitude of their leader than what you see in these texts. And these are people that are going to be coming to power over the next several decades to extend what Nixon, Reagan, Bush, and Trump have already put into place. And let's understand that what they've put into place is all in service of the billionaires and the Heritage Foundation that they answer to. There's a reason why this group in this political party I often reference as vanilla ISIS, because for all of their finger pointing at Muslim terrorist groups and Islamist groups across the ocean, there is no difference between what Islamists want as far as how society should be structured and what the Republican Party and the Heritage Foundation want in terms of what the society should be structured as. They, with the exception of race, both of those organizations want a male-dominated, fundamentalist, religious society where women and anybody else who isn't a white male is relegated to the status of property. There's a reason why I call these people a Dark Ages death cult, because that's what they are. What's interesting is that the people in charge of this party have brainwashed large segments of the population into thinking that the enemy that they have to worry about are those members of society who follow Islam, when it's clear that within the shores of the United States, the biggest threat to freedom are white evangelical Christians. When you actually start digging through all of the texts and all of the instant messages that are going back and forth amongst the members of this group, what's interesting to observe is that they're openly reveling in the cruelty that they want to inflict on their fellow citizens. And if you're not sufficiently right-wing enough, that'll get visited on you as well. And what ties it all together amongst all of these slurs is a set of violent fantasies that these people have that is rooted around the extermination of their fellow citizens. When you have a political party that is driven by the religious right, and that religious wing of that party sees empathy as a sin, these texts and messages are a perfect manifestation of what that actually looks like. The callousness and coldness with which they talk about the extermination of their neighbors and friends is something that we should all pay attention to. We're sitting here watching citizens and people in this country get rounded up by masked thugs who are probably, a certain portion of them were probably pardoned as insurrectionists. Now they are masked and mandated by the leader to round people up and throw them into concentration camps. And meanwhile, Republicans can't be bothered to comment on it because this is part of their design. Stephen Miller had said that his ideal view of the US is one where there's 100 million white people and everybody else is gone. How do you think you actually get there? The young Republicans and the Republican Party in general are showing you exactly how that works. This chat gives you a window into what actually goes through their mind and what their plans are. Now, while all of these things are incredibly damaging, you would expect some remorse or some accountability from the people that are caught up in this, wouldn't you? You'd be wrong. In typical Trumpian fashion, Jinta, one of the people who were exposed in this chat, called it a highly coordinated year-long character assassination led by Gavin Wax and the New York City Young Republican Club. So apparently there's some Republican civil war over who gets to be the head racist in charge, and that's his excuse. Eventually, this Jinta character apologized, but he apologized only because he got caught. And that is yet another Republican trait. You don't admit to doing anything wrong. You admit to the feelings that might have been hurt as a result of you doing something wrong. What's going to be interesting to see as this develops is who else is implicated in this? Who else endorsed these people that were included in these group chats? What other Republicans are giving silent approval or not so silent approval to a group of people that casually hurled every slur under the sun against every possible demographic that's out there? Make no mistake about it. What this series of texts exposed is the true core and roots of the Republican Party. The Republican Party of today are the direct descendants of Operation Paperclip and are the direct descendants of the Confederacy. Their worldview is no different. No matter how often they try to downplay it, the bottom line is pretty clear. The Republican Party of today is a messianic death cult that wants to exterminate 2/3 of the people in the US. The Republican Party of today is not very different from the party in power in 1930s Germany or the Confederacy. They're ideological cousins, and their end goal is to bring forward a white Christian ethno-state where only rich white men are in power and everybody else is property. And the sooner we realize that's what their goal is, the sooner we can respond accordingly. Because no amount of strongly worded letters or notes is going to get them off track. What needs to happen is a large scale, widespread roundup of Nazis and Nazi collaborators. There's a historical lesson that you wage war on the terms of your enemies. The Republican Party and MAGA in particular, and all of their white nationalist stormtroopers have set the rules of engagement. The longer we wait to engage in battle on their terms, the worse off it's going to be. And that's the lesson that we need to take away from this. What Politico exposed is probably the tip of the iceberg in terms of the conversations that are happening. Imagine what's happening offline. Imagine the organization that's happening offline, all with the express purpose of exterminating 2/3 of the population of the US under the orders and the design of Stephen Miller and Donald Trump. That's what we need to think about, and that's what we need to respond to.